welcome to this Fireside chat with Vitalik. He hardly needs an intro. He's the creator of Ethereum, basically why we're all here today. And I'm Camila. I'm the author of The Infinite Machine, a book on the history of Ethereum. I'm also the founder of the Defiant, a content platform focusing on decentralized finance. So in this interview, I want to talk about the present situation we're living in, the present situation for Ethereum, and the future for Ethereum. So starting out, I want to address this unique global situation where we're entering a global financial crisis. So the last big financial crisis is what gave way to Bitcoin and the first wave of crypto believers. And so I'm wondering if you think, with so many similarities with the 2008 crisis, people losing trust in institutions, do you think what we're living in now will spur a new wave of crypto adopters and believers?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question. I've definitely thought about this quite a bit. And I think there's some similarities between the crisis in 2008 and what we're going through now, but there's also kind of quite a few differences, right? So like one of the big ones, for example, is that 2008 was basically entirely a financial crisis, and kind of the main things that were happening are very financial in nature. And you saw the Bitcoin blockchain with its Genesis block, say the times on the brink of a second bailout for banks. But 2020 is not really a financial crisis first and foremost, right? Like first and foremost, it's a virus crisis. And then on top of that, it's a political crisis following 5 years of nonstop political crisis of some form. There's a crisis in epistemology, kind of how people learn kind of what's true about the world, essentially. And there are definitely financial elements, like there's obviously all of the money printing going on, and there's talk about a few people in the U.S. government wanting to delete some of the Chinese government's money, and there's a couple of other things happening. But the financial side is definitely not the biggest part of the story. So so it's kind of both similar and different, right? Like it's the similar part is that there's definitely this kind of failure of institutions and this desire to see if we can come up with something different and better. But at the same time, crypto is inherently born as this very financial thing, and so there is this question of going forward, is crypto going to continue to be a financial thing? Are there kind of non-financial elements of non-financial problems in the world that crypto should try to do something to address? Is it some of both? And I mean, I think those questions are challenging.
Yeah. Okay. So you don't think this will necessarily spur I guess where I'm thinking of this is the response that we're seeing to this crisis is central banks having, printing trillions of dollars, companies taking this opportunity to really censor their users in some cases. Mm-hmm. We've seen it with Medium, Twitter, and governments in some cases infringing on people's kind of privacy and liberties. People have reacted pretty strongly in the US to that. So yeah, that's where I was kind of going, will people see this as, okay, maybe we should find an alternative?
Yeah, no, so I think the concerns around censorship, the concerns around privacy and all of those things and also the concerns around just institutions failing at doing their job, they're all very real. I think the point that I was making is more that kind of the cryptocurrency space, it has currency right in the name, has been kind of, at least for the first maybe decade or so, has been really focused on kind of financial aspects and censorship resistance of money. And there definitely has been this older kind of decentralization and censorship resistance space with things like, Tor, decentralized social networks, Scuttlebutt, BitTorrent, and all of these things. But historically, it's always felt to me like kind of that's one space, and the blockchain space is maybe a sister space, but it's kind of separate. And there's lots of people in kind of one world that think the other world is a scam. But here in 2020, we're definitely seeing a lot of those same themes, but it's just kind of somewhat less financial than before. Like there's still elements of kind of financial, but whereas 2008 was 100% financial, this might be like 1/3 financial. And so I kind of wonder, like how that would lead to this decade being different from the last.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Okay, so I wanted to still, kind of have you imagine a situation where this thing, leads to really a loss of trust in the dollar. Maybe China has its own very controlled digital currency, and people start seeking refuge in crypto. What do you think Ether's role should be there? Like, can it become a reserve global currency? Is it a store of value? Is it the thing that makes the Ethereum network work for decentralized applications? What do you think its role is in that situation?
Yeah, so I think alongside kind of the big crisis, there's definitely a lot of kind of other trends that are happening at the same time. So the trend of kind of CBDCs and things that are not quite CBDCs but seem to be kind of angling close to that, like Libra. And then on the CBDC side, you have China's DCEP, you have all of these other governments starting to look into it. And at the same time, I think there's definitely this kind of element of more and more kind of political discord and political distrust over time. And so within countries, but also between countries more and more. And I definitely kind of think that there's a role for blockchains and Ethereum in particular to play in being this kind of neutral global layer where all of these kind of systems, currencies, and applications can interact. That I think kind of anything kind of created and maintained by nation states can't play that role. So Ethereum as kind of some kind of glue network between all of these different national platforms, I think, could easily happen. They might have to think about kind of what that would entail. Ether as an asset, and I think if the Ethereum network ends up being used, then Ether is one of the most natural and base asset to use in a lot of Ethereum applications, and so it'll definitely end up kind of playing a very significant role as well. Like if you have an application inside of Ethereum and you want an asset that kind of within the context of the Ethereum ecosystem is completely trustless, then Ether is basically it, right?
Okay, so in this scenario where people are turning to a more global, trustless system, you think Ethereum could be the network that connects people across the world, and Ether the main asset that they're using?
I think so.
Great. Okay, and then so I asked on Twitter, for people to tell me what they wanted to hear from you, and a lot of people were interested in just like more mundane, things. So, if I may ask, what does your daily schedule look like these days, and are there any things that you do to boost your productivity and creativity that you can maybe recommend the rest of us?
So I've been reading a lot of different kinds of things. I've gone through a bunch of books over the last month and a half. I've been doing a lot of kind of studying and deep diving into new kinds of cryptography and a fully homomorphic encryption, which is kind of surprisingly less scary and difficult than I expected it to be. So trying to learn, trying to kind of keep talking to and working with everyone on the ETH2 side as much as I can. Also have a treadmill where I'm staying, and I often end up kind of being on the treadmill and listening to things at the same time, which seems to be surprisingly effective. You just kind of have a call, and then you get 8 kilometers in for free. It's great.
Yeah.
So, trying to
do you listen to any podcasts? Sorry.
Yeah.
Where do you listen
to? So sometimes it is just kind of crypto-related videos. Something totally not crypto. There's a friend recommended to me this podcast called A Hardcore History, and it's just these incredibly long 4-hour podcasts on just historical topics. So I went through a bunch on kind of the history of the Japanese Empire. So I thought that was really interesting.
Very cool.
And then
so learning a lot. Cool. Okay. I think that's something we can all take advantage of in this time. Just getting our minds working if we can't get our bodies moving more. Okay.
Absolutely.
So switching to the present day for Ethereum, I guess like the biggest thing going on, but I might be biased because I'm writing about it every day, is DeFi. So wanted to ask you a bit about this space. Are there any DeFi dApps that you regularly use, and if so, which ones?
I have a bit of money in being a Uniswap liquidity provider. I have obviously kind of used the DAI in a lot of cases. I mean, Uniswap itself is really useful and powerful. Like, I mean, Uniswap is just nice because it's like really simple and convenient for a lot of things. So, like, for example, when I downloaded Status and I needed 10 Status tokens to register my username, you could just kind of go to Uniswap and just grab those Status tokens within one transaction. I mean, I've definitely tried out some of the other DEXs. I've tried out Loopring. I've tried out the Optimism Synthetics demo that came out a couple of days ago. And I still want to try out the 0x at some point. So just, yeah, so go.
No, go. Didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry.
Thinking, the exchanges and the assets are definitely a big one. And then you could obviously argue that just kind of Ether as a medium of exchange is also a kind of DeFi, right? Payments as part of finance. And I've definitely used Ether to pay for things from time to time as well.
Yeah. So what did you think of kind of the newer DEXs like Optimism that just came out and Loopring?
They're definitely doing a better and better job of being a kind of competitive with centralized exchanges on user experience. So like one of the nice things that Optimism does, right, is that they have this model where you have a sequencer, kind of this, it's kind of a central party, except it's kind of reassigned, or the plan is to reassign it once in a while by auction. So it's kind of like, on Twitter, I made this kind of mini thread a couple of weeks ago about what I call kind of bounded centralization, where you kind of have a centralized actor for efficiency kind of surrounded by decentralized kind of scaffolding that prevents them from doing anything really bad, and you kind of tightly constrain their scope. So they do that sort of thing. And so basically, in any case where the sequencer isn't kind of breaking, you get kind of an immediate kind of pre-confirmation from the sequencer after about 500 milliseconds, and the sequencer then kind of basically puts out a kind of crypto-economic bond that says they'll include this in the next block, right? And if they don't include this in the next block, then this crypto-economic bond, this ETH that they put down, can just get burned. So that's nice. Loopring, and I forget, I don't think they're doing that, but I think even still, like both of these systems, the Optimistic and the ZK, they can go up to kind of over 1,000 transactions a second, right? And so I think a lot of people are not appreciating that, there's people saying that kind of, sharding has a high risk of being incredibly far away and all those things. And I think, first of all, sharding is closer than people think. But second, even if that's true, over 1,000 transactions a second, that's potentially a 100 factor increase from where Ethereum is today. And you need these kind of technologies that have roll-ups that are basically, one of them is in beta and the other one of them is already live. So that's something I'm very happy about.
Yeah. So, do you think, are these DEXs kind of demonstrating that, the DeFi space can continue growing and serving maybe a larger audience than it is now without having to wait for ETH to launch?
Absolutely. I think DeFi definitely has a chance to kind of continue growing and start serving more users. I think the fact that it's improving usability is huge. Like, I mean, we saw how Uniswap came along and just massively raised the standard for usability in decentralized exchanges. And with Uniswap, there's obviously the concern of, well, how do you handle kind of large volumes of trading that you can only handle well with order books? And now we're starting to see, I mean, there's both this kind of 0x style off-chain order family, and now there's also this roll-up based kind of fast on-chain family. So that's been great. I think stable coins, the fact that they've been just kind of running stably for a while is great. I'm also looking forward in the stablecoin space to seeing other synthetic assets. Like, I think we shouldn't just have synthetic crypto dollars. I think you should have synthetic S&P 500, synthetic other currencies, other kind of world assets. I mean, potentially even kind of synthetic assets that are representing things that don't even exist in the real world. I mean, like, you can have something pegged to the CPI. I mean, you could do lots of things, right? So that's one side, and then on the other side, we want kind of more innovation in oracles. And the other thing I want to see is a kind of more governance minimization. Like, I think in general, if you have a system where kind of governance is like really, really active, and they're proud, and if they're very proud of the governance being active, but at the same time, like, there aren't really limits on the role that it can play, and you create a system that it has more backdoor kind of opportunities for being hacked. It has more risks in it. And sometimes there's benefits, but at the same time, like, I also want to see people building more kind of simpler systems of the simpler variety.
Oh, that's interesting, because it has been kind of a big trend in DeFi recently for these platforms to move towards DAOs and governance tokens, like Compound did recently with its Comp token. Synthetics also wants to do it. Kyber with KNC. So the space is definitely going in that direction of like tons of like active governance with tokens. But you're right that it does pose a risk. Like it opens up the system. It makes it more complex. So it makes it more vulnerable, right?
Yeah, so and the way I think about this, right, is that the lower level your application is in the stack, kind of the more it should be de-risked and kind of maximally simple. And the higher something is up the stack, and if the more it can be more complicated and kind of more powerful. So that's why I say that I'm kind of both pro governance minimization in some contexts and pro kind of pretty radical governance experimentation in other contexts. Like, I think something like a stablecoin, for example, is very low level, and we should be seeing more kind of governance minimized stablecoins. But something like, I don't know, Moloch DAO, for example, like the fact that Moloch DAO exists, I think is great. And then, there's like Gitcoin grants and kind of quadratic funding. And when you talk about quadratic funding, well, for that to work at all, you need to have some kind of identity system, you need to have anti-collusion and all of these things. And that already kind of really ratchets up the technical requirements. So you need both, and it's a matter of kind of knowing like whether you're doing a low-level thing or a high-level thing.
Right. It's like I think the with time we'll start to see which platforms actually need these government systems and which don't, and are just better off with more simpler systems. And with these tokens, because I think we're still in this point where projects are trying to figure out exactly how to use tokens, and a lot of them are, like trying to figure out a right business model with their token. And so governance plays a role. Like, they're trying to give their tokens utility by having them be a vehicle for the community to participate. So, I'm wondering if it's not governance. How can like platform specific tokens be used and given utility, or do you think there shouldn't be as many platform specific tokens?
So, I think kind of advertising governance as the primary value of a token is kind of a bit wrongheaded. And the reason why I think it's wrongheaded is that, I've written blog posts about this, right? Like basically kind of marketizing governance of public resources just because of how the economic equilibriums work kind of inherently leads to plutocratic outcomes, right? And the reason why that's the case is because, like, if you imagine two people, like Alice and Bob, where Alice has, say, $1,000, Bob has $1 million, then Bob will obviously be able to afford 1,000 times as many governance tokens, right? And so Bob will kind of have the ability to get 1,000 times more influence, which you might say is fine because Bob's 1,000 times bigger than Alice in an economic sense. But at the same time, the amount, basically because the amount of influence that Bob can get is 1,000 times bigger, but the amount of benefit that Bob can get from each unit of influence is also 1,000 times bigger, right? Like if Bob has 1,000 times higher kind of probability of affecting some outcome compared to Alice, but because Bob has more money, Bob also kind of in monetary terms gains or loses 1,000 times more from how each outcome goes, right? And so there's some sense in which kind of Bob's influence is quadratically larger, like you have 1,000 times the other 1,000 than Alice's influence. And so I think basically if people really do value tokens primarily for governance value, then the equilibrium will end up being that there would be just like maybe 4 or 5 very rich people or potentially funds or exchanges that will end up kind of buying them up, and you'll lead to a fairly centralized distribution, right? So that's my concern. I think in general, the value, like people should view the value of tokens more as basically being kind of discounted shares of future revenue, essentially, right? Either that or as kind of utility tokens where you gain utility if you hold a token. Like, and both models are kind of economically fairly legitimate. Right, so like for example, the way that they work in MakerDAO, where you have MKR, and then MKR might get burned, and it is being burned over time, I think is totally cool. Tokens of the model that say, if you either burn some amount or if you are holding some amount, then you can have some ability to do something within the platform. I think those are cool too. But making token models is definitely hard, and there's definitely projects that where I think they do have a token. It doesn't really make economic sense for them to have a token, but we have this kind of ongoing crisis in this space that there's a lot of public goods that can't really be funded unless you kind of awkwardly slap a token onto them, and so right. I don't like the behavior, but at the same time, I don't blame the people because we are kind of in these difficult circumstances, and so they're trying to do the best that they can.
You're right. It seems like we still haven't really figured out what how exactly tokens should make this business models work. But okay, so and I wanted to switch to kind of the risks that we've seen in DeFi recently with, there's been so many hacks and financial attacks on these platforms. And, was kind of thinking back to the ICO days where it seems like the fatal flaw for ICOs was it attracted a bunch of scammers because the incentives weren't really aligned, and then regulators shut them down. So with DeFi, do you think a fatal flaw for DeFi could be that it's just because of its nature, it's vulnerable to attacks, and then it attracts like a bunch of hackers, and then that draws regulators to shut it down?
I definitely don't think that all DeFi is vulnerable to attacks. There's plenty of kind of more responsible DeFi projects that have successfully survived for a pretty long time without getting attacked. So like the most recent one, right, it was just a project that basically copied Compound's code and just did not understand what they were copying with it and started monkeying around, and kind of got lucky that they were able to find the hacker and force them to return the money pretty quickly. So it's definitely not an inherent property of kind of DeFi itself, and there definitely is a way to do DeFi responsibly. But the way to do DeFi responsibly, and unfortunately, has to do with like basically you can't your goal, the thing you're marketing in a DeFi system should not be performance, right? It should not be, oh, this has an interest rate of 8%, our competitors have an interest of 6.5%, therefore we're better, right? Because the reality is that the probability per year that any one of these systems breaks is probably still larger than 1.5%. And like people should definitely not be competing on saying, oh, this other thing has collateral requirements of 150%, and we only have collateral requirements of 130%. Like, no, at least don't compete on those dimensions, right? The thing you should be competing on is basically like, can you make a system that's simpler? Can you make a system that has kind of fewer moving parts and kind of fewer potential backdoors to it? And we should be aiming toward just getting a few basic building blocks kind of running stably for some amount of time. So now there is, of course, the question of, well, are the incentives in building a DeFi project potentially skewed so that people would value kind of grabbing for users as much as they can over minimizing risk of getting hacked? And so those projects all act in a way that's risky, and so some of them kind of succeed and then bash themselves up over time, and others have incredibly big splats, and they only suffer a small portion of the cost of the splats, and they just say, like, go say, oops, sorry about that, and they kind of walk away. And meanwhile, the regulators get angry at the whole space. Like whether or not that kind of market failure exists, it might, and that's it's definitely an interesting question. And if there are things that we can do to try to kind of counteract that kind of incentive, we certainly should.
I mean, the reason why I said, DeFi is maybe more vulnerable to attacks than, other kind of less open and decentralized applications is because the code is out there for people to see and like find ways to exploit. And at least like that's what DeFi applications are trying to do. And even trying to remove the team's control over the app is something that most applications are working towards, but can also minimize their level of response at the times of attack. So how do you think, like what's the right way to balance those goals, like having an open and decentralized system, but also keeping users safe?
And so I think like centralized finance systems get attacked all the time as well, right? So, you have Mt. Gox in 2014, you have Bitfinex in 2016, you had kind of a couple of those Korean exchanges in the last 2 years, and you had some other Bitfinex kind of situation. So there's definitely centralized financial systems definitely do get attacked kind of over and over again, and they definitely have these kinds of consequences over and over again. We just kind of talk about it less because, well, we're kind of half, used to all of these systems having kind of bad security, and we're trying to come up with newer systems to have better security. I think there's the way out. I think has to do. With a couple of different things, right? One is that I think because the code is open source, one of the benefits is that you have a lot of people looking at it, and so if you have a lot of people looking at it, we want more people to be kind of actively going in and going and auditing other people's DeFi projects and kind of making sure that they work. Another thing is that some of these DeFi projects, they have what get called kind of admin keys or admin backdoors in certain respects. And in the early stages of a project, there's sometimes value in that sort of thing, but at the same time, it poses a risk. And then sometimes people do kind of the smart thing, which is they have these kind of partial backdoors where the admin can do one thing, which is potentially just like shutting down a project to everything except for withdrawals, and they can't do anything else. So having better practices in that regard, I think, is important. But there's definitely a limit to how much we can do at the end of the day, because there's always the possibility that some project will come along and just like doesn't care about any of these things and just cares about kind of users, and kind of let's make a big blitz and go quickly. And
yeah,
we should just try to do what we can and discourage that sort of thing.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of responsibility on the side of the users for now, just like informing themselves of, has this platform done an audit? How, the team behind it, has it been tested? Like all these things before actually, putting money in. Okay, so I want to go now to Ethereum's future, which I guess like the biggest thing in Ethereum's future is ETH 2.0. And so for those who don't know, ETH 2.0 is an entirely separate chain from Ethereum's current chain that will adopt proof of stake instead of proof of work, which is a consensus algorithm that kind of where nodes agree on transactions, and it also will increase scalability with sharding, which breaks the main chain up into smaller pieces. So in this transition, the idea is to have kind of a one-way bridge between ETH1 and ETH2, right?
Yes. So basically, at the beginning, kind of during what we call phase 0 and then phase 1, there's going to be a one-way bridge from ETH1 to ETH2, which is basically just there for staking, right? So if you want to stake, you take your 32 ETH, you deposit your 32 ETH, and then you become a validator and you can start staking. The thing that will happen after phase 1 is this kind of merging event where you basically take the kind of existing state of phase 1 of the ETH1 chain, and you just kind of cut it out of the ETH1 chain and you kind of paste it into the ETH2 chain. And then from that point on, ETH1 becomes just sort of part of the ETH2 system. And at that point, you'll be able to kind of freely move between, being an ETH1 kind of participant and being an ETH2 validator.
Okay, and then the ETH1 old chain just dies. Like it becomes too hard to use, and like the expectation is for everyone to migrate.
Exactly.
And then with ETH2, where exactly will the ETH1 chain be like transplanted to? Like, is it going to be its own separate shard? I think that's kind of one of the ideas I read. Okay, and then so one criticism I've heard about having the entire ETH1 chain on one shard is that does that have the potential to start running into the same scalability issues that we're seeing now with the current chain?
Right. So the idea is that the ETH1 chain on one shard is not going to be a kind of the only execution thing that runs, right? Like there's going to be other shards, and I mean, worth considering kind of either copies of the ETH1 system on other shards or potentially kind of systems with somewhat different rules on other shards. So applications are going to be able to live on other shards, right? And so if there's not enough space on one shard, because the whole point is that you'll be able to jump to the other ones.
Right. Okay. And then you wrote about this, but I still, wanted to talk about it, is whether having different applications on different shards, especially in DeFi where the whole system is so interconnected, does having applications on different shards make it harder for these applications to connect? Like, will sharding break DeFi composability?
And I think so. Applications on different shards can still communicate to each other, right? The main kind of limitation is that they can communicate asynchronously, right? So instead of kind of having a back and forth communication within one transaction, you're going to start one transaction that creates this receipt, what we call this kind of cross-shard message, and then a second transaction on the other shard that kind of later on, usually in the next slot, kind of consumes that receipt and performs some action. And it turns out that for most use cases of interaction between applications, kind of asynchronous is enough, right? Because either you can, payments you can do asynchronously, a lot of things you can do asynchronously. And we also have this mechanism called yanking, where if you need to interact synchronously with something, then kind of first you move your entire contract over to the other shard, then you do whatever synchronous interacting you want to do, and then if you want to, you can move back, or you can just stay there until you need to do something else. So we've definitely done considered a lot of things to make cross-shard interactions easier. Now, will applications be able to still talk to each other more if they're living on the same shard? Yes, and we're trying to kind of improve the other case as much as we can, but there's definitely kind of inherent limits, right? Because you can't make a sequential scale, kind of a scalable system that supports arbitrary interactions, because someone could always create an application that just says the first thing calls the second thing thing calls the third thing calls the fourth thing, and all the way up to 10,000 things. And so because that would basically just kind of force the system to have one computer that's capable of processing all 10,000 transactions, which breaks scalability, right? So there are kind of inherent and unavoidable limits to what you can do within the context of a scalable system, but we're trying to do as much as we can within those limits.
Right. Okay. And then, so we talked about what kind of the limits of ETH2. So what are some of the applications that you think would be possible in ETH2 that aren't possible now?
The applications would be kind of fairly similar. It's just that they would be a lot more scalable, right? So there's definitely a lot of people that wants to build many kinds of applications. And a lot of the time it's something in the enterprise context, like something to do with every time there's a transaction of a certain type, they kind of save some kind of record onto the chain. And even things like consumer payments, whether that's with ETH or with stable coins, various kind of non-financial applications, and even using kind of things like ENS, just using the blockchain for storing certain kinds of information. There's a lot of things that people are starting to do already, but people are not really doing that much, because you have these potentially 20, 40 kind of cent transaction fees. And if you have ETH2 and you have much more scalability, then those transaction fees drop by a factor of 100. And so, the trade-offs become a lot more favorable to those kinds of things running on a chain.
Right. Okay. And then what are some of the risks that you're most concerned about personally in the migration of ETH1 to ETH2?
I think there's obviously kind of the risk that on the technical side, we'll run into just more roadblocks and challenges than we expected. That's probably the big one. I'm in terms of kind of community and political risk, I'm definitely less concerned than some other people are. One of the reasons is that a switch to proof of stake and sharding has been part of the Ethereum kind of social contract since almost the beginning. And so there would be just kind of too many people that would be upset if it gets delayed for non-technical reasons. And also kind of a lot of the people that kind of don't believe in that vision already moved over to, say, Ethereum Classic during the DAO fork. So I'm definitely less kind of concerned that there would be any disruptions from the social side. So there's risks that we see and of unanticipated technical challenges. There's, also just kind of the ETH2 system and kind of the upgrade to the ETH2 system, and is taking up a lot of resources, and you have to building a fairly complicated new system. You have to audit it. You have to write the spec. You build all the clients, and there's just looking at the kind of the expense of building out that ecosystem and upgrading existing parts. And it seems like everything is fine in that regard, but you never know.
You never know.
In general, I'm very confident about the transition.
Okay, and this is a question you get asked all the time, but I have to ask the timing. What's the latest on that? On all the different phases? When should we expect them to launch?
Yeah, so for phase zero, we have a testnet already, right? So Prismatic released a Topaz testnet a couple of weeks ago, and the Shwezi testnet was released a few days ago, and now the Shwezi testnet has, as of yesterday, 3 clients on it. So he has Prism, Lighthouse, and Teku is the third one. So we're already at the point where we have a testnet that has 3 clients on top of it. So that's roughly the equivalent of where ETH1 was like a few months before launch. So now the question is just a matter of like how long do the audits take, or kind of how many bugs do we end up finding? Like how long will it take before we can see a network consisting of all 3 types of clients with a lot of users and of working stably? So it seems like a few months for phase zero. And then, phase 1 and the merge are definitely harder to predict, right? Because there's more work left to be done on those. Yeah, and then on the ETH 1.x side, I think we're seeing a lot of progress, right? So we're seeing Beam Synco with Nethermind releasing kind of already. There's a lot of work on kind of account abstraction and EAP 5059, and there's a lot of people that want to make kind of one or more of these major upgrades by the end of to the kind of ETH1 ecosystem by the end of the year. So we'll see.
Okay, so a couple of months for phase zero, and then for phase 1, do you think it would be this year or sometime next year?
Phase 1, I definitely expect to be next year.
Okay. All right, and then to finish up, like, what are some of the applications that you're looking forward to getting built this year?
Definitely kind of more stable coins and kind of more synthetic assets and oracles of different kinds. More kind of more governance experimentation and more kind of DAO type things. And I've been kind of very excited about the progress that Status has been making, kind of a Ethereum and Whisper-based decentralized chat application. And that's been making a lot of progress. There's a lot of what else is there? Just the kind of the community of people kind of building many thousands of small things, some of which I haven't heard about until someday I just kind of wake up and someone that tells me, or I find out from the internet that like, hey, there's this entire company that's kind of publishing some kind of records of all of their purchases to the Ethereum blockchain or whatever. Also, I think kind of cryptocurrency and stable coins for payments. I mean, I think like that's always been kind of one of the original dreams, and I think with the kind of improvements in user experience that we're going to get this year and the next, I think it definitely makes sense to start making another go at that. So.
Great. Okay, so I think that's a good place to end. Looking at the future, I think it's so cool how you've unleashed Ethereum into the wild, and now there's thousands of people building on it. And like you said, you don't even know exactly what's being built each day. And it seems like stablecoins will continue to be an important theme this year, and making the dream of actual peer-to-peer payments possible and easier, right?
No, thank you very much.
Yeah, it was great chatting. Thanks so much.